Hey folks, Jammo Rising here, and I recently watched those two big movies that have been taking the world by storm. One of them was really good. It's called Oppenheimer. It's about Oppenheimer, the guy who made those bombs that killed a couple people, ended a war, and ushered in the nuclear age. It's 3 solid hours, mostly of people talking. Now, the director Christopher Nolan is known for huge extravagant cinema, we all know this. You might remember him from such films as The Dark Knight, Inception, and Interstellar. This is not that. It's a biopic and marks an interesting turn for Nolan. His last film, Tenet, was absolutely bonkers, a hypersonic smorgasbord of wacky action and even wackier exposition, as the film attempted to continually justify its wild chronological mechanisms. I enjoyed it for what it was, especially since we rarely see cinema of that budget and magnitude that come from a real singular voice, as opposed to something like this. But I understand the criticisms. Oppenheimer, though, is about as drastic a departure from that time-twisty clown carnival as you can get, while still feeling like a Nolan film. It's his most restrained picture, for sure, and probably his most mature, even if it wasn't my favorite. I'll spare you the lengthy synopsis. Like I said, it's about Oppenheimer. The movie's called Oppenheimer. It's about building the bomb and the period of time leading up to and out of that defining moment of human history. We'll get to the filmmaking in a second, but what I enjoyed most about this film was the element of existential reckoning, the horrible morality of unleashing a world-altering science and utilizing physics to create a weapon of untold devastation. This is focused through the lens of Oppenheimer himself, played by the great Cillian Murphy and his beautiful, beautiful eyes. Seriously, just look at those orbs. The supporting cast is also stellar, as one expects from a Nolan film, with everyone from Iron Man himself to Florence Pugh turning in excellent performances. No Michael Caine though, weirdly. Is he just like too old now? My favorite scene in Tenet was when he showed up for 5 minutes to eat steak. I don't know, maybe he was scared of the COVIDs. I mean, I probably would be too if I were 90 years old, but still, it was weird seeing a Nolan film without him. And make no mistake, even though Oppenheimer is comparatively restrained, this is still a Nolan film. He just can't help himself, bless his little heart. Even in this straight biopic narrative, he feels the need to jump forwards and backwards in time with abandon, framing the life of Oppenheimer in at least 2 time periods simultaneously. This isn't confusing, since the time jumps are delineated by black and white cinematography, and I didn't mind it, I just thought it was funny. Nolan loves complication in his filmmaking, and I just don't know if this structure was really necessary, but whatever. Maybe he thought he needed to spice things up, since it is 3 hours of people in rooms talking, punctuated by one glorious explosion. Regardless, the editing is really well done, and I'd be surprised if it's not nominated for the Oscar in that department. Ditto for the score, which I dare say drives the film and informs its tone more than anything else. This would be a very different movie if not for the score. It pulses with nervous anxiety beneath the skin of the scenes, and the way it continues and transforms even as we jump backwards and forwards through time serves almost as a connective tissue. It's hefty, sometimes intrusive, sometimes subliminal, and makes every scene feel like a part of the same nervous entity, beyond what we see in other films. Whether or not this is to the benefit of Oppenheimer is a question of some debate, but it is inextricable from how the movie functions as a piece of art. If you re-edited the film to just be chronological and injected a more traditional score, it would play completely different. All in all, Oppenheimer is a very good movie. I recommend it. I don't think it's Nolan's best or my favorite. It plays a little long. I found the middle chunk more interesting than the aftermath, and I don't think it's one I'll be rewatching much. It just doesn't seem very rewatchable, but I loved its scope and ambition and filmmaking and all those things that make Nolan such a good director. He's one of the few that can still get these big budget movies made at all without studio executives fingering his pie. That's how that's phrased, right? I'm pretty sure. Anyway, moving on from a very good film to possibly the worst thing I've ever seen. It's called Barbie. You're probably familiar with it, and maybe you even like it, in which case, you may not like me after this review, but my thoughts are what they are, and maybe you can try to understand what I'm saying rationally without the pitchfork. You know, I've had occasion to talk about some pretty bad movies, both on this channel and the old podcast. The Matrix Resuscitations springs to mind, or new Star Wars stuff, but they mostly fall into the category of bad entertainment. Barbie, however, had so much vitriol in its veins, so much contempt for its audience, and such a level of moral and philosophical bankruptcy at its core that it was actually kind of horrifying. I guess you could make the argument that this movie wasn't made for me, a grown man, and it's just a bit of justifiable fun being poked at the male gender for centuries of misogyny. But in this case, I think this is missing the forest for the trees, and I would like to make the argument that this film is detrimental to everybody, woman and man alike. Before that though, I want to touch on how this movie is being politicized, and how if you don't like it, it's because you're some conservative anti-feminist woman hater, and it makes you uncomfortable to face some hard truths about yourself. Well, not to piss on the proverbial parade, but I'm actually a pretty liberal guy. Women have not gotten a fair shake through history, and the recent steps to promote equality and chip away at institutional horrors like the Harvey Weinsteins and so on are long overdue. But to me, Barbie, the film, wasn't really about any of that. That was just the sheep's clothing being worn by the wolf, so to speak, so that any real discourse can be immediately shut down. This is gonna be a weird and graphic analogy, so bear with me, but watching this film reminded me of that infamous talk show episode where Sharon Osbourne and some other ladies were talking about a woman who sliced her husband's penis off and put it in the garbage disposal, and Sharon Osbourne and her friends laughed. This was the cinematic equivalent of that. The film starts out in Barbie Land, where all the Barbies are wonderful creatures full of love and friendship, and all the Kens are slobbering idiots. There's trouble in paradise though when Barbie gets existential, having thoughts of death, and so she and Ken journey to the mortal realm to rectify the situation. They emerge in modern Los Angeles, where she's immediately hooted at by construction workers, slapped on the ass by a passerby, and generally assaulted in ways that might have made sense if the movie took place in 1952. Meanwhile, Ken finds the glory of the patriarchy and brings its domineering philosophy back to Barbie Land, and Margot Robbie Barbie and the other Barbies must stage a coup to take back their utopia. The big problem with the film is that it's actually horribly simplistic and preaches a message of hate. I don't know if you know this, but all men are either stupid or evil or both. And all women are perfect just the way they are. And if a man loves you, ladies, you should use your superiority to manipulate their stupidity and make them feel bad about themselves. This overriding theme is exemplified in a gruesome scene where the Kens sing to the Barbies on the beach, and the Barbies use a coordinated maneuver, first ignoring them by looking at their phones, and then walking over to another Ken to instill petty jealousy. This is emblematic of the film as a whole. There are many scenes of this caliber we could discuss, but I really want to get past this as quickly as possible and on to something else. Speaking of the interpersonal, the most depressing element overall was the relationship between our central Barbie and Ken figures. Ken loves Barbie, but Barbie doesn't love Ken. In fact, it's revealed that his whole reason for adopting the patriarchy was because he felt devalued by her, which we see again and again in the opening minutes. All he wants through the whole film is recognition that he's a person too, but this individuality is denied through her dismissive actions. One might argue here that this is an inversion of stereotypical male-female archetypes and a commentary on the devaluation of women, but to me it comes off more like a passive-aggressive hate manifesto by an embittered millennial than any grasp at equality, which is really what the movie should have espoused rather than petty resentment. I'm by no means an expert, but I did read a fair bit of feminist theory in university, and call me crazy, but I thought it was about equality, not domination. All men bad, all women good, so make men feel bad is not a positive message. It would be fine, I guess, easy to gloss over if nobody took this movie seriously, but I feel like the way it's being analyzed and pedestaled as some sort of beacon of social commentary is very problematic. The film even tries to backpedal all of this unbridled animosity in the last act with a transparent monologue about individuality, but it rings completely hollow, and I walked out. It's all the more shame because the filmmaking is actually pretty fun and inventive, and if it came from a more inclusive ideological perspective, I think it could have been pretty good. But as it stands, it might be the most hateful movie I've ever seen, and I did a podcast on funny games. At least that movie didn't disguise its contempt for the viewer. Barbie, though, I don't know if I'm taking it too seriously, I genuinely might be, but the discourse surrounding it is what it is, and this was my takeaway. I thought it was a petty, misandrous nightmare. As a man, it reads as spiteful and degrading, and the message to women is really no better. I can't say it enough, it comes from a place of hate. And treating men as stupid subhumans simply as an inversion of history, if that is what it's doing, makes you no better than the patriarchy you so revile. You should be kind to people, no matter their gender, not dominate and manipulate them like some kind of sociopath. It's a sociopathic film. And you know what? That's Barbie. It's one of the most well-reviewed films of the year. And now, if you'll excuse me, I'm going to go take some bong rips laced with battery acid. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to hit the dislike button, and I'll catch you later. Go watch Oppenheimer.